Hello. Uh, Greetings, everybody. I'm Elsie. Today we're talking a little bit about different aspects of displays. And in this video, we will be covering virtual displays. And the information we're covering in this particular presentation will also cover some simple websites that you put together with a caveat. So if you want to know how to build a Google site, the best advice I have for you is to go search for tutorials. Go to YouTube, go to Google. I have done these in the past. What I find is the program changes fast enough that often 6 months after I've done the tutorial, it's out of date. So your best bet is to go search for the tutorials done by professionals, because they're going to teach you the technical elements and the bits and pieces. What I'm going to talk a lot more today is about content, more so than technique and ways to get stuff done. So along the idea, there's a kind of a companion video to this. The first video I produced for this series is looking at doing static displays for non-static arts. There's a lot of information in there about philosophy and ways to think about bringing things to the table. If you have some challenges where you're starting off and you're not sure what information to share and that sort of thing, it may be worth watching that video, because there may be some philosophy in there that will help you. And we'll touch on some of the same things here, but I think that's a good starting place. If you already sort of have the beginning of an idea, let's go ahead and delve in from there. So what's your goal when you're doing a website? I'm a firm believer that knowing the destination is really helpful whenever you start out on a path, because personally, I'm really lazy and I hate doing work twice. So if I know where I'm going, I tend to make fewer choice mistakes. I sometimes have side adventures, but the path is a little bit smoother. What I will add to that, if we're doing a simple thing, I'm going to speak a lot from the bias of working in West Kingdom's Google system. If you are doing something within that, you're starting up a web page, you're going to have a really long URL that includes the kingdom's name. You are not the admin on that URL. If this is something you would like to own, maybe it's something where you're going to purchase a simple domain, like I have equisedu.com. I also have hallowedhippology.com. Those things, I have built that still using Google. I've actually built it in my mundane account, because then I own all those things. So if this is something you're going to want to have some level of ownership, a special name for, a special URL, build that outside the kingdom system. If you just want to put something forth, or maybe somebody's running a virtual artisans display and you're like, oh, I really want to play along, how do I get started? Then you can do things in the kingdom system. That's all really simple and straightforward. If you have done a display or something in somebody else's system, or maybe on somebody else's website, make sure you keep a list somewhere of those URLs of things you've done in the past. Maybe you did a bunch of pages during the pandemic. Keep a list of those URLs. That's good information and stuff you can share with people. Often you can go through and get a copy. If you've done artisan displays of anything I have access to, and you need a copy of the stuff you put together, let me know. I'm happy to get you digital copies of that within the kingdom system. Okay, so I'm going to take you guys through how I build a page. And this is an example of the page I put together for Apotheca. It's most of the stuff that's in here. When I do a simple artisan's display, I generally focus on the work more so than the details about myself. I will put a few examples in there where I go through and, hey, this is me. This is where you can find examples of my previous work. But I'm really interested in getting my art out there and interacting with other people through my art. So I don't tend to do a big, long bibliography about myself. When I'm thinking about how to structure things, I usually think about presenting for a big display. I generally present 3 to 6 sub-projects and topics. If I were doing an in-person display, I'd prefer about 2 to 3. What I find with digitals is if I set it up in the right way, I do not expect anyone to, except for the strongest of addicts, to go through all 6 things. I think most people are going to pick one, maybe, and go through that. But I like to have a little bit of variety in there. Sometimes this is material I'm trying to get down on paper anyway, so that I have handouts and presentations and documentation to share. And I give the options as we go through. So this is kind of a first draft of a picture page. This is a screenshot of the whole thing. So the details are going to be a little small and hard to read, but you kind of get a feel to stand back and go through things. For this particular one, I was leaning towards probably doing 3 to 4 little subtopics. I have my subtopic categories right there, because the material underneath the subpages was very dense. If you have a very simple display, this first page may be all you need. You maybe have some completed work you want to show off, you want to keep things simple. Bam, put the photos, put a little bit of word, you're good. I'm going to go through a little bit about how I develop and think about and put different things in place. And what I tend to use as a theme for me, because I mean, I like sharing pretty pictures of my horses, but I also try to bring a little bit of theme to the table. A lot of times I am working at providing answers to questions I get routinely. There are certain questions that non-riders will have about riders and about horses in period that I get over and over and over again. So when I do these displays, I tend to build them as mini lessons about those topics, because then when I get the questions again later, I can share the URL. Makes my life a little bit simpler. So this was the first subpage. This is one of those topics that I'd gone through, and these were slides that started from an hour-long class that I had taught. So I did actually have the material pulled together, but I was reformatting it into something that was going to look better on a website and be something that people could tour through and interact with the way that they were used to. So this is kind of an initial layout, and I've got a little bit of stuff broken up. It's very busy. For one thing, there's a lot of prepositional phrases in here because I just kind of writing this. I write very much. I am having some problems. One moment. There we go. Let me go back. Revna, are you guys still seeing my screen?
Nope, we are not.
All right, let me go back a little bit, put you guys back on screen share. Okay. That should work. We'll go back. I think we were here when I started talking. And look, it's like nothing went wrong. Okay. So, I write a lot like I speak. So many prepositional phrases. So a lot of times in order to tighten up the language and thus tighten up the visual layout in the space, I have to go through and edit. I have to take out all those prepositional phrases. I have to force myself to use active voice. That sort of thing, when you want to put a lot of text on a page, will actually make your content better. So the other thing that I have done on this, and I do this a lot in my artisans displays, is I use a lot of collapsible boxes. So I'll have a very simple message, sometimes just a heading up here, and then there's an arrow that you may or may not be able to see on your screen, depending how big your screen is, that people can press. Underneath that, I have, for example, the quotes of all the period material I have, so that the person who really is interested, somebody who's taking this on a superficial level, they can just look at the bright and shiny. For somebody who really wants to dig beneath, maybe they're looking for resources for their own projects, I share everything in a convenient location where they can access it. But the rest of the time it's tucked up tight so that it doesn't make my page that much longer with that much more scrolling as people are interacting. Here is a different topic. This was also something that I started with slides, and I went ahead and just kind of put the slides in as photos, but because the text was so tiny on the slides, by the time I reduced them to smaller photos, it was just too little, even on a large screen, let alone on a phone. So I went ahead and I started splitting that information out. I pulled the images off of the slides. I took the text and the references and I put them in their own text boxes. And this is the same information that was in that prior photo, but it's just spread out in a way that's a little formatted to be a little more friendly for a computer, and certainly more friendly for a phone, because this allows the computer to move things around in its display and you can look and see what's there for the scroll wise. But I haven't actually included any of my words at this point. So it's would be a little too busy if I were to add the extensive text and the things I wanted to say along with what was there. So I went through in this particular case, and I have greatly simplified this. I'm actually really happy with this layout. This is a simple little bit. You know, it's about as much information as you would put on a t-shirt. It's easy to look at and easy to interact with, even as it's condensed down to a narrower format for a phone. It's not too much scrolling. I do have collapsible boxes. And what I did is I used under the collapsible boxes, in this case, I went ahead and I put my various visuals in there. So that I can add I have room to add explanations as I need to, and the person who wants to interact more in depth with the display can do so, but it's not going to wreck the world for everyone. So then we get into the third topic and where I approach this from. This was not one where I was building from a class. This was one where I was building something where I had a ton of resources. Sometimes for me, and this is what I love about doing things digitally, I just have to kind of, photo vomit all over the page and put down everything I have. And then edit from there and move stuff around and try to condense it down and use all these techniques we've been doing. As I laid things around together, I started to develop a cohesive dialogue. That whole mess of photos that we started from had various things that it condensed down into, and I was able to actually pull up a couple of topical things. I've got my ubiquitous drop-down boxes for people who want more information, and that really pulled things together for me. One of my themes, as you listen to me go through my planning process and how I do this, I do not expect most people to look at everything that I've put together. I expect most people don't, actually. But I do try to make it really easy to move back and forth, putting in previous page buttons, next page buttons, a button for the home page on everything that goes back so they can always get back to where they need to. Don't make it so that they have to use the back brush on their browser. Make it so that they can move and they can navigate throughout your system just from being on the page. Most web designs will go through, and give you at least a little bit of a drop-down menu. Most modern ones do for simple websites. It is amazing how many people can't access menus. So one of the things I do is I include buttons and I include really obvious links, and sometimes I'll even include instructions to touch them in my various web designs, because some people just don't click the menu button and it makes it easier for them. If for some reason I can't fit all the buttons in a way for the design, I'll include instructions on access the menu and here's how to find it. And that makes it easier for people to navigate through, particularly the casual viewer. Like I said, the addicts, we're going to dig in, we're going to find those things. But for something like an artisan's display, just like in person, a lot of the folks you're interactive with just want a little tiny taste. They don't want the whole in-depth side of things. For a little bit of parallelism, I had slides that I happened to have done for two of my topics because they were both from classes I had taught before. I went with that theme of having a simple slide on that first page to let people know where to go to. So I developed some slides that fit these other two topics that I had added in that weren't from classes I had taught before, just to extend that parallelism and keep things going together. So lessons learned and things really to think about as you kind of look at your design and your content and how to describe these things and all that. One of the firm things that I was taught when I was first designing things in PowerPoint is don't put more information on the slide than you put on a t-shirt. Make sure that things are visually appealing. If stuff is looking cluttered, you may need to spread it up into a separate page. You may need to hide it behind the drop-down menu, something to not overwhelm people with that image and some of those really long initial photos. The more modern way of expressing that, if you haven't done slides in PowerPoint, might be to try to make it look like a good app. We've all worked on good apps and bad apps, and we know some of the simple things that work in well there in terms of layout and visual appeal. Try to make your displays a little more like a good app than like a bad app that's hard to get through. One of the biggest tools that I use is I have a program on my browser called Full Page. It's free, that allows me to screenshot whatever I'm doing on my computer. So I can really go, okay, how much scrolling is actually involved in this? How cluttered does this look? And I can kind of give myself that image to, does this look like a good app? Does this look like a good slide? Or does this just look like too much and it needs to be broken up? So those images that I was showing as you were going on, those are full page screenshots from working in my browser of what the websites would look like. Many of the web design tools will have the ability to do a preview of what it will look like on a phone, tablet, or computer. So try as much as you can to make it look okay on all three. Sometimes you have to make some choices, but make those choices with forethought. Is this something people are mostly going to be accessing from a phone, or do you expect them to mostly be looking at it from their computer? And then you can set your layout out so that it looks best on your preferred design, but be aware people will use all three tools. In terms of thinking about how to navigate, this is the buttons versus menu. If you can, set up for both. You're going to have the most success with the widest array of people. If you can't, include instructions. The clicking and not clicking. Some people will not follow links. If you make the link a button, they're more likely to follow it than if it's a link in the text. If it's in a menu and they can find the menu, they might follow links from that, but a lot of people won't follow links in text. So the more you can make it look like those other things, you increase your odds, because the alternative is to put everything on one page where no one ever has to click on anything, but then you get the busy page problem. So you have to find that balance of where your personal breakpoint is, and maybe tailor that a little for who your intended audience is. I personally, I tend to split stuff out. I am a splitter in life, not a lumper. I do try to go through as much as possible, have the same information, the same links in my menu and in my buttons, so everybody can go where they go. And I try really hard to build some parallelism into an individual page so that you will actually start to train your viewers and your readers. They'll start to learn to associate different colors with things they can push. They'll learn to associate, oh, I click this button, it gives me a mini lesson. I go back, I click the next. That you actually will start to build that pattern of searching and following in the people that you're teaching, which actually can be very, very helpful. So for anyone who is curious, this is the URL, and I'll include it in the comments when we post the video of what that final project wound up looking like. And I'll just kind of show you the screenshots side by side for how busy these pages are and what it looks like when I take a look at the whole thing. And with that, if we don't have any questions, we can go ahead and stop the recording. And thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.